When Oregon Governor Tina Kotek released her proposed budget yesterday, it did not include mention of the $500 million or so that experts say will be needed for future semiconductor land development. The Oregonian reports that the governor plans to leave tax incentives and other issues around that up to lawmakers. But before the legislature even gets to that, there's the issue of where the huge plants should be built. With Oregon's unique land use laws, there are no plots of land ready to go right now. Earlier this week, those studying the issue for the state, including the Port of Portland's Keith Levitt, made that clear to lawmakers.
The headliner is these 500-acre sites. We found none. And so we spent a lot of time understanding where communities are, who is interested in having these very large sites, and no surprise that the focus became in Washington County in the North Hillsborough, the North Plains area. Both of those communities are engaged in urban growth boundary expansion processes, but not expansions to the level of bringing 500 acres in.
Levitt said that a firm hired to look for suitable land checked out 74 different areas shown on this map, from Medford to Central Oregon and the Willamette Valley. The map shows they found only 2 possible locations for the 500-acre site, which is what they believe a semiconductor plant would need, and those are both in the North Plains and Hillsborough area. Levitt told lawmakers it would not be politically easy, but creating those sites is worth it.
This is a sector that is unique among all of the industrial sectors in the state. There is really nothing that offers the volume of jobs and the quality of jobs, and then the economic equity opportunities, because a lot of these jobs, nearly half of them, are accessible with a high school to community college degree. And then you go all the way up the scale, and we're attracting PhDs from all over the world.
Now, did you hear that mention of economic equity? I think we're going to hear that more and more as this debate really picks up steam in the months ahead. It's the idea that the semiconductor business pays very well and that those jobs can help people overcome economic discrimination. Here's Gresham's Mayor Travis Stovall making the same point in support of the plan.
As we think about industrial lands, as we think about the opportunity that sits before us, and that really is equity. And this really, when I think about the opportunity that exists here for us to look at our communities, and Gresham is at the forefront of this, when we look at the average household income, we don't have the opportunity to move forward until we have the jobs available throughout every single one of our communities. That is a critical component to when we start talking about how do we give everyone the opportunity to go from poverty to prosperity.
And so here comes that real clash of values, high-tech jobs versus farms. As I mentioned earlier, Oregon has a unique land planning process called the urban growth boundary. Basically draws lines around every city in the state, and you can build and develop inside the line, but not outside. That's why you can drive 30 or 40 minutes west of Portland and be in the country, rural areas with beautiful farms. But critics say it's also the reason why homes inside that growth boundary cost so much. It restricts how much land is available. But let's stick with farming for just a moment. Remember the 2 areas where the consultant found possible sites for the new semiconductor plants? Well, they're prime farming areas, and they're outside the urban growth boundary. Enter the farmers. They love growing blackberries and raspberries and lots of other crops in the fertile soil around the Hillsborough and North Plains area. They argue that the dry months of the summer make that a uniquely perfect area for such crops, and they do not want to see any of that land turned into industrial sites. They also argued that an agreement struck just 9 years ago between several groups that were suing each other over land use there was supposed to lock in for 50 years what is allowed and what's not for development of the land. Now, some, including berry farmer Larry Dyke, worry they will be betrayed by lawmakers.
It was a deal. It was a deal that the farmers, the counties, Metro, the legislature, both the House, the Senate, and the governor signed. It was something that everybody made an agreement on. It was a deal. It wasn't a bargain. But anyway, this took place in 2014. So, and that was supposed to be a 40 to 50 year process. It was supposed to be good for 40 to 50 years. So right now we're in 9 years. So that's why we strongly oppose any development onto land designated as rural.
Now, you need to know, in addition to that battle, there's another problem that might seem simple to fix, but I guess the fact that it's still there shows maybe it's not so simple. Whenever anything is built, especially anything big, there's all sorts of regulations meant to make sure that it's done correctly. Regulations like permits. But deep inside the government machines that control such things, there is apparently dysfunction. Don't take my word for it. Listen to a former state lawmaker from Oregon who spent 20 years fighting to untangle government regulations and then ran for governor. You know her as Betsy Johnson. We will be calling her KGW's political analyst, Betsy Johnson.
It's not just the siting of the chip plant. That's easy to say. That's a land issue, and I think it can be rectified fairly easily. What it doesn't say is the difficulty to securing the permits. The regulatory morass that Oregon puts any company, chip company, any company through in order to get the permits to build is just unbelievable. System development charges, permits from this, that, and the other agency. We permit sequentially instead of permitting all at once. It's a nightmare, and Oregon has a reputation now through the failure of some very high-profile projects. We have a national, if not an international, reputation as a hard place to do business with. And so I don't know whether it's good enough to just say we're going to throw money at this problem. We've got to break down some of the regulatory barriers.
Thank you, Betsy Johnson. And you did hear that right, by the way. She's our new political analyst. We look forward to having Betsy on often to help us with insights on Oregon's government and politics surrounding the biggest issues affecting our state. When we asked if there were any topics she felt were not political and outside her expertise, she laughed and said, everything is political. So she's going to be a lot of fun to work with. We're going to be talking to her a lot. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about urban growth boundaries versus semiconductor expansion. What do you think? Do you think that we should go ahead and try to attract all those high-tech companies? Or do you think things should stay right where they are now? Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you could call and leave a voicemail. The phone number is 503-226-5090.